Over 100 people gathered at the Stoddard Place Apartments Monday night. Many were in tears. Some said they were family members of the deceased, many not wanting to talk. A man shot and killed a woman and then turned the gun on himself.
An adult male was engaged in an argument with an adult female. He reportedly took a gun and he fired at the adult female before turning the gun on himself.
Sheriff Chip Simmons said there were witnesses to the shooting.
We understand that there were a couple of witnesses. One was an infant child.
An uncle of the female victim said the couple lived together at the complex and had a 4-month-old baby. He says they had been together for over a year.
A single click, one simple Facebook status change from in a relationship to single. For most of us, it's just another ordinary part of moving on after a breakup. But for 22-year-old Jakavia Simmons in Pensacola, Florida, that one digital declaration of independence would cost her everything, her life, her future, and leave her 4-month-old daughter orphaned in the span of minutes. On May 16th, 2022, what should have been a routine Monday became the deadliest day in the lives of two young parents. Jakavia's decision to update her relationship status triggered a response so violent, so immediate, that witnesses would struggle to comprehend what they had just seen. 5 gunshots echoed to the Stoddard Place Apartments, ending not just one life, but 2, leaving behind an infant daughter who would never know her parents and a community, grappling with how love could transform into such lethal possession. This isn't just another domestic violence case. This is a story that exposes a deadly intersection of social media, possessive control, and the terrifying moment when a partner's independence becomes perceived as the ultimate betrayal. What makes this case particularly haunting is how completely it blindsided everyone who knew them. Family members, friends, neighbors, none saw it coming. To them, Jakavia and Tradarius Gray appear to be just another young couple navigating parenthood together. But appearances, as we'll discover, can be devastatingly deceptive. Behind the social media posts showing a happy family, beneath the surface of what seemed like ordinary relationship challenges, a dangerous dynamic was taking shape. One where Jakavia's growing desire for independence would clash fatally with Tradarius's need to control. The case reveals warning signs that went unrecognized, systems that fail to protect, and the chilling reality that sometimes the most dangerous moment for a domestic violence victim is the moment they try to leave. For Jakavia Simmons, that moment came when she made the same decision millions of people make every day. She changed her relationship status on Facebook. Welcome to True Crime Station, where we explore cases that matter, examining not just what happened, but why it happened and what we can learn to prevent future tragedies. We don't sensationalize, we educate. Have you ever witnessed controlling behavior in relationships around you? Those subtle signs that seem like intense love, but felt more like surveillance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences help all of us recognize warning signs that could save lives. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Cases like Jakavia's teach us crucial warning signs we all need to recognize. From the outside, Jakavia Simmons and Tradarius Gray look like any other young couple in Pensacola, Florida. Their relationship followed what many would consider a typical trajectory, a year-long courtship that deepened when Jakavia discovered she was pregnant. For two people barely out of their teens, they seemed to embrace the prospect of parenthood with genuine enthusiasm. The excitement was visible to everyone around them. They spent time setting up a nursery in their shared apartment at Stoddard Place, carefully selecting items for their soon-to-arrive daughter. Social media became their canvas for documenting this new chapter, with posts showing Jakavia's growing belly and Gray's apparent pride in becoming a father. These digital snapshots painted a picture of domestic contentment that their families found reassuring. When their daughter arrived, the couple seemed to settle into parenthood naturally. Photos from this period showed Jakavia cradling her newborn, while Gray looked on with what appeared to be genuine affection and pride. To their support network, they represented hope. Two young people stepping up to the responsibilities of raising a child together. Corey Richardson, Jakavia's uncle, became an important witness to how the family perceived their relationship. In interviews following the tragedy, Richardson expressed complete bewilderment at what had occurred. The last time I saw Jakavia and Tradarius, they were happy and laughing together, he recalled, his voice carrying the weight of someone trying to reconcile the couple he knew with the violence that would follow. This sentiment was echoed by other family members who had welcomed Gray into their circle. There were no obvious red flags during family gatherings, no moments that caused concern about his character or his treatment of Jakavia. If anything, he seemed committed to both Jakavia and their daughter, participating in family events and appearing comfortable in his role as both partner and father. The social media presence they maintained reinforced this perception. Their posts showed typical moments of young parenthood, Late-night feedings, first smiles, the exhaustion and joy that comes with caring for an infant. Friends and family members who followed their accounts saw no indication of trouble brewing beneath these ordinary moments. Yet this public presentation masked a private reality that was growing increasingly complex. While their external life projected stability and happiness, internal pressures were beginning to mount. The gap between what they showed the world and what was actually happening behind closed doors would prove to be one of the most dangerous aspects of their relationship. The ability to maintain such a convincing facade while dangerous dynamics developed privately represents one of the most insidious characteristics of domestic violence situations. For those who care about Jakavia, the public face of her relationship provided false reassurance that she was safe and happy. This disconnect between public perception and private reality would prove crucial in understanding how the warning signs remain invisible until it was too late. Gray's success in presenting himself as a devoted partner and father meant that Jakavia's support network had no reason to be concerned about her safety. The very people who might have intervened or offered help saw only the surface-level happiness that the couple projected during their interactions. This carefully maintained appearance of normalcy would become a critical factor in the tragedy that was building toward its inevitable conclusion. While Tradarius Gray successfully maintained the appearance of a committed partner and father, court records revealed a far more troubling reality. His adult life had been marked by multiple arrests, creating a pattern of behavior that should have raised serious concerns about his capacity for violence. Most alarming was an aggravated assault charge filed just weeks before he would murder Jakavia, a serious violent offense that occurred while he was actively parenting a newborn daughter. The timing of this arrest was particularly significant. Gray had committed a violent crime serious enough to warrant aggravated assault charges, while living in the same home as Jakavia and their infant daughter. This represented a critical moment where intervention might have altered the trajectory toward the ultimate tragedy. Despite this arrest, Gray was released and returned to the domestic environment where Jakavia and their baby lived, representing one of several junctures where different decisions by the legal system might have prevented what was to come. Beyond his documented criminal history, subtler signs of controlling behavior were emerging in their daily interactions, though these would only be recognized in retrospect. Friends later recalled instances that seemed innocent at the time, but took on darker significance after murder. Gray would frequently check Jakavia's phone, questioning her about male friends and contacts. He would become visibly agitated when she made plans that didn't include him, behavior that initially appeared to be devotion but was actually surveillance. One friend remembered a pattern that became increasingly uncomfortable. He'd call repeatedly if she was out with us. At first, we thought it was sweet that he missed her so much, but looking back, it was about knowing where she was at all times. This constant monitoring represented the kind of possessive behavior that domestic violence experts recognize as a precursor to more serious abuse. But to those experiencing it gradually, it can seem like intense love rather than dangerous control. Text messages recovered from their phones after the murder revealed the increasing tension that had been building in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Arguments about parenting responsibilities, financial stress, and Gray's legal troubles had created significant fractures in their relationship. The messages showed Jakavia expressing growing concerns about Gray's criminal behavior and what it might mean for their daughter's future and well-being. In one particularly telling exchange, Jakavia had written, "I don't want our baby around this kind of stuff. We need to think about what's best for her." This message revealed her growing awareness that Gray's legal troubles weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern that could endanger their child. Her maternal instincts were pushing her toward prioritizing her daughter's safety over maintaining their relationship. The progression of Gray's controlling behavior followed a pattern that domestic violence experts recognize as typical but dangerous. What likely began as attentiveness and concern gradually transformed into monitoring and restriction. Jakavia's independence became increasingly limited as Gray's need to know her whereabouts, activities, and communications intensified. This gradual escalation made it difficult for both Jakavia and her support network to recognize the behavior as abusive rather than simply intense romantic attention. These warning signs were present and escalating, but they remained largely invisible to the people who cared about Jakavia's welfare. Have you noticed these patterns in your community? Let me know in the comments. Your awareness could help someone else recognize danger. For individuals like Gray, romantic partners aren't seen as autonomous individuals with their own rights and agency, but rather as possessions to be owned and controlled. This distorted perspective transforms normal relationship dynamics into questions of ownership and dominance. This possessive mindset stems from a fundamental inability to accept partners as independent people deserving of respect and freedom to make their own choices. When Jakavia began asserting her independence, What should have been a difficult but manageable breakup instead became perceived as a catastrophic threat to Gray's sense of control and self-worth. Her desire to end their relationship wasn't seen as a right to choose her own path, but as an unacceptable betrayal that demanded response. Domestic violence experts have identified several key risk factors that significantly increase the likelihood of intimate partner violence escalating to murder. Gray's situation contained multiple overlapping risk factors that created an extremely dangerous environment. His documented history of violence, including the recent aggravated assault charge, established a pattern of using force to solve problems. The presence of a firearm, which he would ultimately use to kill both Jakavia and himself, provided a means for lethal violence. Perhaps most significantly, the couple was in the process of separating, which represents the most dangerous period for domestic violence victims. Statistics consistently show that the risk of intimate partner homicide increases dramatically when victims attempt to leave abusive relationships. For possessive abusers like Gray, separation represents the ultimate loss of control, triggering what experts recognize as potentially lethal desperation. The extreme jealousy and possessiveness that Gray exhibited went far beyond normal romantic feelings. This wasn't simple jealousy about other potential romantic interests, but rather a comprehensive need to monitor and control every aspect of Jakavia's life and decisions. This level of possessiveness reflects a psychological state where the abuser's identity and self-worth become completely dependent on maintaining control over their partner. Gray's response to Jakavia's assertion of independence followed the terrifying logic that governs many domestic violence homicides. If he couldn't have her, then no one could. This mindset reveals how possession becomes confused with love in the minds of abusive partners. What Gray likely perceived as protecting their relationship was actually the complete destruction of Jakavia's autonomy and ultimately her life. The psychology behind this type of violence also involves a distorted sense of ownership that extends beyond the immediate relationship. Gray likely viewed not only Jakavia but also their daughter as extensions of himself rather than separate individuals with their own rights and needs. This explains why he was willing to orphan his own child through his actions. In his mind, his sense of ownership and control took precedence over everyone's well-being, including his daughter's. Understanding the psychological framework helps explain why seemingly normal relationships can suddenly explode into lethal violence. The possessive mindset doesn't develop overnight, but rather builds gradually as control and behaviors escalate, and the abuser's need for dominance becomes more complete. By the time the behavior reaches obviously dangerous levels, the victim is often already trapped in a situation where leaving becomes the most dangerous action they can take. This case demonstrates how the intersection of possessive psychology, access to weapons, and the decision to leave creates a perfect storm for intimate partner violence. Gray's inability to accept Jakavia as an independent person with the right to end their relationship made her quest for freedom a death sentence. The Facebook status change that triggered his violent response wasn't seen by him as a normal part of ending a relationship, but as an unacceptable public declaration that his control over her was ending. May 16, 2022 began like countless other Mondays for Jakavia Simmons. There was nothing in the morning routine, caring for her 4-month-old daughter, managing the ordinary tasks of daily life, that suggested this would be the last day of her life. The apartment at Stoddard Place showed no signs of violence that would soon unfold within its walls. It was, by all appearances, just another day in the life of a young mother trying to navigate the complexities of parenthood and relationships. After weeks of mounting tension, legal troubles, and growing concerns about their future together, Jakavia had reached a decision point. The text messages between her and Gray had revealed increasing strain as she expressed worry about his criminal behavior and its impact on their daughter's welfare. The aggravated assault charge hanging over Gray represented more than just legal trouble. It symbolized a pattern of violence that Jakavia could no longer ignore or accept as part of their family's reality. Her decision, when it came, was communicated in the way millions of people end relationships in the digital age. Jakavia accessed her Facebook account and made a simple but definitive change. She updated her relationship status from in a relationship to single. There was no lengthy explanation, no public airing of their personal conflicts, no dramatic announcement. Just a clear, straightforward declaration that her romantic relationship with Tradarius Gray had ended. For most people, changing a relationship status on social media represents a normal, if sometimes emotionally difficult, part of moving forward after a breakup. It's a way of informing friends and family that a chapter is closed and a new one is beginning. The action itself takes seconds, a few clicks, a brief moment of decision, and then it's done. Jakavia likely felt a mixture of relief and sadness as she made this change, emotions that are entirely normal when ending a relationship that produced a beloved child. But for Gray, this public declaration represented something entirely different and infinitely more threatening. The Facebook status change wasn't seen as Jakavia's right to publicly acknowledge the end of their relationship, but as a humiliating and unacceptable rejection that demanded immediate response. His reaction would transform a routine social media update into the trigger for double murder-suicide. Hours after the status update appeared on Jakavia's profile, the sound of gunshots shattered the relative quiet of the Stoddard Place apartments. Gray had responded to her digital declaration of independence with 5 bullets that ended her life in moments. The shooting occurred with witnesses present, including their 4-month-old daughter, who would survive physically unharmed but orphaned in an instant. The violence was swift and decisive. Gray didn't attempt to argue with Jakavia, didn't try to convince her to change her mind, didn't give her an opportunity to explain or reconsider. His response was immediate and lethal, suggesting that he had already determined that if he couldn't control her, no one would have her. The 5 gunshots that killed Jakavia represented the final assertion of the possessive control that had been building throughout their relationship. After murdering Jakavia, Gray turned the weapon on himself, completing the murder-suicide that would leave their daughter completely orphaned. His decision to take his own life rather than face the consequences of his actions represented the ultimate expression of his inability to exist in a world where Jakavia was independent of his control. Sheriff Chip Simmons later confirmed that there were witnesses to the shooting, including the infant child who was present during the violence. The presence of witnesses, particularly their daughter, added another layer of trauma to an already devastating situation. Those who saw the violence unfold would carry the memory of those moments for the rest of their lives, while the baby girl would grow up never knowing her parents, but bearing the psychological impact of being present during their deaths. The immediate aftermath brought the community together in grief and shock. Over 100 people gathered at the Stoddard Place apartments on the night of the shooting, many in tears, some identifying themselves as family members of the deceased. The response reflected the profound impact that such violence has on entire communities, not just immediate families. Neighbors who had seen Jakavia and Gray as just another young couple were forced to confront the reality that deadly domestic violence had been developing right next door. The murder of Jakavia Simmons represents more than just a personal tragedy. It exposes critical failures in multiple systems designed to identify and prevent domestic violence before it escalates to murder. Despite numerous warning signs and several points where intervention might have changed the outcome, the mechanisms meant to protect victims like Jakavia failed to recognize or respond to the danger she faced. Gray's recent aggravated assault charge should have triggered more comprehensive evaluation of the domestic situation. Here was a man with a documented history of violence who had committed another serious violent crime while living with a domestic partner and infant child. The legal system briefly detained him, but ultimately released him back to the same environment where Jakavia and their daughter lived. This represents a fundamental gap in how the justice system assesses and manages ongoing risk to domestic violence victims. The failure wasn't just in the immediate response to Gray's arrest, but in the broader inability of the system to connect his pattern of violent behavior with the increased risk he posed to his domestic partner. Domestic violence experts have long recognized that men who commit violence outside the home are significantly more likely to commit violence within intimate relationships, yet this knowledge didn't translate into protective action for Jakavia. Beyond the legal system's failures, the case illustrates how effectively abusers can maintain public facades while engaging in private control and intimidation. Jakavia's family, including her uncle Corey Richardson, saw only the surface-level happiness that the couple projected during family gatherings and social interactions. Their ability to appear normal and functional while dangerous dynamics operated beneath the surface demonstrates how domestic violence can remain completely hidden from support networks until it explodes into lethal violence. This invisibility of abuse is particularly dangerous because it means that potential sources of help and intervention remain unaware of the victim's situation. Friends and family who might have offered support, resources, or safety planning had no idea that Jakavia was in danger. The very people who cared most about her welfare were kept in the dark by Gray's successful manipulation of their public image as a couple. The role of social media in triggering the final violence adds a contemporary dimension to this tragedy that highlights new challenges in domestic violence prevention. While changing relationship status is a routine action for most people, it became a flashpoint for deadly violence in this case. This demonstrates how digital platforms can amplify existing tensions in abusive relationships and create public moments of perceived rejection that trigger violent responses from possessive abusers. The timing of Jakavia's Facebook status change and Gray's violent response suggests that he was monitoring her social media activity, possibly as part of the broader pattern of surveillance and control that had developed in their relationship. This digital monitoring represents a modern form of stalking that can be difficult for victims and their support networks to recognize as dangerous behavior. Perhaps most tragically, the presence of their infant daughter during the shooting represents a complete failure to protect the most vulnerable victim in this situation. While she survived physically, she was exposed to trauma that will have lasting developmental and psychological impacts. The systems designed to protect children failed to recognize that a home with documented domestic violence and recent criminal charges was an unsafe environment for an infant. The broader community response, while supportive, also revealed how unprepared most people are to recognize the warning signs of escalating domestic violence. The shock expressed by neighbors and community members who had known the couple reflects a general lack of awareness about how domestic violence develops and escalates, even among well-meaning people who care about the victims. These systemic failures created a perfect storm where a dangerous individual with documented violent behavior was able to maintain access to his victim despite multiple red flags that should have triggered protective intervention. The gap between recognizing risk factors in academic or professional settings and translating that knowledge into real-world protection for victims represents one of the most significant challenges in domestic violence prevention. The murder of Jakavia Simmons serves as a devastating reminder that domestic violence often reaches its most dangerous point precisely when victims attempt to assert their independence or leave abusive relationships. Her story illustrates the tragic reality that the very act of seeking freedom can become a death sentence for victims of possessive abuse, transforming what should be a fundamental right into the trigger for lethal violence. This case exposes several critical warning signs that were present but went unrecognized by those who might have intervened. Gray's documented criminal history, particularly the recent aggravated assault charge, represented a clear pattern of violent behavior that should have raised serious concerns about his safety as a domestic partner. The presence of these legal troubles while he was actively parenting an infant with Jakavia created a high-risk situation that demanded protective intervention. The controlling behaviors that friends later recalled, phone checking, questioning about male friends, repeated calling when Jakavia was out, updating a relationship status, became deadly for Jakavia because of Gray's inability to accept her right to publicly declare their relationship over. This highlights the need for domestic violence safety planning to include digital and social media considerations. The complete shock expressed by Jakavia's family members demonstrates how successfully Gray masked his dangerous behaviors from those who cared about her welfare. This ability to appear normal in public while being controlling in private is one of the most insidious aspects of domestic violence, as it prevents victims from accessing the help and support they need. The systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to occur point to the need for better coordination between criminal justice and social service systems. Gray's pattern of violent behavior and recent criminal charges should have triggered more comprehensive risk assessment and protective measures for Jakavia and their daughter. The gap between recognizing risk factors and implementing effective protection represents a critical area for improvement in domestic violence prevention. Most importantly, this case underscores the necessity of taking all forms of controlling behavior seriously, regardless of how they're initially presented or rationalized. The behaviors that friends later recognized as warning signs, excessive calling, monitoring, jealousy about male friends, represent early indicators of the possessive mindset that can escalate to lethal violence when victims seek independence. For those who might recognize similar patterns in their own relationships or those of people they care about, this case provides crucial lessons about the importance of safety planning, professional support, and understanding that leaving can be the most dangerous time for domestic violence victims. The tragedy that befell Jakavia demonstrates why domestic violence intervention requires specialized knowledge and resources that go beyond well-meaning but uninformed attempts to help. The preventable nature of this tragedy makes it particularly heartbreaking, but also means that similar cases can be prevented through better recognition of warning signs, improved system coordination, and increased community awareness of domestic violence dynamics. Jakavia's death serves as both a warning about the deadly potential of possessive abuse and a call to action for better protection of domestic violence victims seeking independence. This case shows us that domestic violence can hide behind the most normal-looking relationships. What do you think could have been done differently to save Jakavia's life? Share your thoughts below, and if this video opened your eyes to important warning signs, please share with others who might need to see it. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these vital messages. The murder of Jakavia Simmons stands as a stark reminder that domestic violence doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs that everyone can see. For Jakavia, the simple act of changing her Facebook relationship status from in a relationship to single, something millions of people do safely every day, became her death sentence. In the span of hours, a routine digital declaration of independence triggered 5 gunshots that ended not just her life, but also orphaned her 4-month-old daughter and devastated a community that never saw it coming. Traudarius Gray's inability to accept Jakavia's autonomy transformed a normal breakup into a murder-suicide that destroyed an entire family in moments. Today, their daughter grows up without either parent, carrying trauma from violence she was too young to understand but was forced to witness. She represents a lasting victim of domestic violence that extends far beyond the immediate targets, affecting entire families and communities for generations. Jakavia Simmons deserved the right to change her relationship status, to make decisions about her own life, to seek independence when a relationship was no longer working. She deserved to raise her daughter in safety, to see her child grow up, to have the future that was stolen from her in those terrible moments at Stoddard Place Apartments. This is True Crime Station, and if this case has opened your eyes to domestic violence warning signs, don't let this video end here. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our analyses of cases that matter. Share this video with someone who needs to see these warning signs. Your share could literally save a life. In the comments, tell me, what resources for domestic violence victims are available in your area? What warning signs have you noticed that others might not recognize? Your insights help build a community that protects the vulnerable. Together, we can ensure Jakavia's story creates change needed to prevent future tragedies. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being part of a community that believes every person deserves to live free from fear. I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue examining cases that demand justice and change. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and never forget, your voice matters.